If your family's gathering this Christmas, it could easily be the first time you've all been together for a year. And you might find there's one conversation in particular that's coming up. Because when we move into old age, there are issues to address. The home might be harder to manage. There could be health problems. And someone in your family might have to downsize or move into a retirement village or aged care. These aren't easy conversations, not for anyone. But if it is time to talk, much better to do it than leave things to drift. You're about to meet a couple of people who are experts at helping others through this stage. Their businesses depend on that expertise. Brendan Burwood's the founder and managing director of IPAC Financial Care. Lisa Oshlack's the founder and director of Moving On, and we'll find out what she does in a moment. And I'd also like to welcome Kath Brewster, the president of COTA New South Wales, the Council on the Ageing. Hello, Kath.
Hello, good morning.
Brendan, I want to start with you. Welcome.
Thank you.
These conversations I mentioned, what do people actually say?
Look, it's quite a complex and confusing time moving to residential aged care, and I think it's the biggest challenge for the families to get their head around the fees and charges that are associated with the system. But unfortunately, no one tends to plan, so it's usually a health-related trigger event that's the driving force, and families get very consumed by how to deal with that. Mum or dad may have had a fall, a broken hip, the progression of dementia, and then all of a sudden might be in a hospital bed and have identified that they really can't move home.
So that is the common scenario. They've been managing after a fashion. Perhaps they haven't wanted to confront how more difficult it is, and neither of their children. And then all of a sudden there's an incident, and after that, decisions are forced upon them.
Exactly, and it often comes down to one of the children. We call them the chief family officer. Families are very complex things, as you can imagine.
Yes.
There's normally one child that might be located closest to mum, or has always dealt with a lot of issues, or been an indirect or a voluntary carer for many years in the lead up. And that person is really kind of in the war zone sometimes, trying to identify where will mum go for aged care, but also how will they fund all those costs.
This is one of those conversations that can kind of spoil the festive atmosphere a bit, and I can imagine lots of families, all the kids, as it were, sitting around saying, "Bags not. I don't want to talk to mum or dad about this."
Exactly. And I think what we've seen in the past is that the families that had the most success with bringing up that particular topic, because let's face it, no one really wants to move into aged care. They'd like to stay at home for as long as they possibly can. But families that actually try to attempt to have a family meeting or a family conference and broach the subject, and there are really successful ways to do that I'm aware of, rather than sort of telling mum or dad that it's time to go into care. Obviously, that's not going to be responded to very well. But asking them what are their wishes if something was to happen is usually a great way to start the conversation, so that mum or dad can identify, well, what kind of care would they be looking for? Is it a religious facility or non-religious facility? What location? They've got to think about people visiting, what's practical and what's standard of care. And sometimes just having that scenario put in front of them is easy to have the conversation, because it's not a direct instruction that you're going into care.
Well, I want to bring you in, Lisa. Your business helps people move into that, but you also help people who don't quite need to do that. So if someone doesn't need to move out of the house just yet, what are some of the, I suppose, living options that make life staying at home easier?
Okay, so one of our services is our decluttering and sorting service. And this is a service to help people well before they may need to move, to actually prepare the home to make it safer, to make it more comfortable, that mum shouldn't have to get up on a stepladder to get her winter shoes out of the top cupboard or her jumpers, actually rearranging their everyday living space and make it more orderly, perhaps organising the right equipment to be put in to support her needs if she has had a fall but she is able to stay at home. But it's really getting the practical things in the house in the most suitable areas. You know, the last thing we want is someone who's collected or lived in a house for 40, 50 years has got things in top cupboards. It's really making it practical.
Well, it sounds simple, but I know it won't be straightforward. I mean, if someone's been living even in a house for 20 years, they're going to have a lot of stuff perhaps that they don't need. And actually kind of auditing that, going through that can be very emotionally confronting.
Absolutely. So whether people are going to stay in their house or they are planning to move, starting to declutter and move things on to other areas. There are ways you can sell things. There are plenty of needy charities that you can give things to. And then, of course, landfill is definitely the last resort, and that's for things that are so pre-loved that they're of no use to anybody.
You also do the I suppose, the move itself, if there is a move to be made. What role do you undertake there?
Okay, well, we undertake a lot of different roles. We support on an emotional level and actually help guide people to the moving process. So we pack, we move, we unpack them into their facility, or just if they're downsizing, they might be on the third floor of a unit, needing to move to a ground floor apartment so they can stay at home for longer. So we offer the downsizing process, and then we again help with the selling, giving to charity, rubbish removal, cleaning, a very all-encompassing experience to nurture them through a very challenging time in their life.
Yeah. I'm wondering how you encourage and manage that process, but at the same time as I do, I'm wondering if it's harder or easier because you're not related, because it's not your mum or dad. There's a little more distance.
Yeah, we take a practical approach. You know, we're not emotionally attached to any of the items, but we understand and are compassionate that they are and that their family members are. So we try and encourage them to give things to their family or friends. That's a really great way, because then they can visit them and still see the items. If they are downsizing, there's a reality to how much they can take. You know, a 4-bedroom house doesn't fit into a 1-bedroom retirement village or aged care facility or a downsized unit. So we just try and explain that, you know, the reality is that there are sentimental attachments, but it can't come with them. So we try and approach them. We've got different questions to ask. You know, for example, they've got 5 metres worth of wardrobe space, downsizing to 1 metre worth of wardrobe space. There's a reality to probably 80% of the stuff in their wardrobe they're not wearing anymore. The clothes don't fit them. The miniskirt doesn't suit them anymore. They
may want to hang on to it.
But there might be a daughter or a granddaughter that might appreciate it even more. It's a beautiful vintage piece. So it is about helping them and inspiring them to actually part with their stuff in a positive way, that it's not just going to the tip. You know, there are so many shelters, there are places that people love and need their things, and people actually turn and love that their stuff is going to live on. Okay,
well, come back to you both, actually. I want to bring in Kath Brewster from COTA, New South Wales. Kathy, are you surprised that there are already commercial operations offering services like Brendan's and Lisa's?
No, I am aware of them, and certainly they have their place. I do have to say, though, that picking up something that Brendan had said about telling mum or dad what to do, I think that each is in a different case, unique to the person concerned and to their individual circumstances, to their health, their financial circumstances, their family circumstances, their living arrangements, social environments and network and all that sort of stuff, all that sort of thing. But for every individual, there is a raft of 4 documents which are essential to mapping their ageing journey in a considered way. And that, of course, is their will, their advance care directive, the enduring power of attorney, and the enduring guardianship. And I think that this is something that we should all face up to and have in place, because we never know when our circumstances may change dramatically, and we not be in a position where we're legally competent to make the decisions.
But even, it occurs to me, even if you suspect mum or dad don't have that, having that conversation can be challenging enough, isn't it? Because it does force them to confront the fact that they're ageing and they may not be ageing well, and that, you know, that they're mortal.
Certainly, but I think that we need to accept as a society that we need to think about these things much earlier in the piece. It's no good leaving it until a decision has to be made in a hurry, and very often not in the best of circumstances. And I think also, again, coming back to what Lisa has been saying, the decision to downsize, whether it be to move or to move into care or downsize in any way, is an extremely emotional one. Because we're not just talking of moving house, getting rid of excess stuff. We are talking of moving a house full of memories and making decisions about what of a lifetime of family memories, which often manifest as stuff, one is able to live without. I mean, I suppose we're talking, if you like, about downsizing a life, and how emotional is that? And
well, it may be helpful then to bring in people from outside, because you know, it's not something that many of us are expert at, and of course although family members you would hope would be sensitive, they have they're conflicted about this, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I take the point about the degree of separation, but I think that family or close friends are the obvious sources of the discussion and decision, because I think that it helps in two ways. It helps the individual concerned as they relay to posterity, if you like, that lifetime of memories, without which later they may feel shortchanged. And it can help the family to come to understand why certain things are so precious. I know that in my own cupboards I have got things which have a great deal of meaning to me, but intrinsically they don't have necessarily that much value. However, if I can explain to my children and grandchildren that this is how they come to have those memories for me,
yes,
that will make them so much more significant to my children and grandchildren. And I think that they may feel happier at a later date. They may feel happier looking back and saying, oh yes, I know why this was so important to Granny, and
yes,
why I enjoy it now.
On Life Matters today, we are talking about what is not an easy conversation and not an easy thing to do, and that is that decision to probably move out of the home, to downsize, or perhaps to move into a retirement home or an aged care facility. With me are Kath Brewster, she's president of COTA New South Wales. Lisa Oshlack's has a firm called Moving On, which helps people do this, and Brendan Burwood, the founder and managing director of IPAC Financial Care. Brendan, what are the financial issues that you discuss with people? Because they are obviously, in one sense, they're obviously money. They're obviously about money, but it's more complicated, isn't it?
It's definitely more complicated because the aged care system has a unique set of fees and charges that interact with pension benefits. And unless you're really immersed in that on a daily basis, it's very difficult to navigate your way through the maze. And I'm glad Kath and both Lisa have mentioned the emotional side of things, because imagine trying to make one of the largest financial decisions in your life in such an emotional environment. And that's where we feel that an independent advisor can really help navigate the process. There are fees and things like basic daily care fees, accommodation charges, income-tested fees, accommodation bonds, and it's the bonds in low care and high care extra services that can be quite significant.
We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Well, you could be $200,000 up to $1 million in some parts of Sydney and Melbourne. So, it's a very large transaction.
But I suppose someone going into this, so they might sell a house, say they sell their house for, I don't know, $700,000, and their bond is $400,000. And they think, well, I've got $300,000 now. I could invest that. That seems sensible, but it is actually a bit more complicated than that, isn't it?
Exactly, and sometimes families come to the conclusion that, well, we'll just put that balance into a term deposit. But what they might not realise is that could completely wipe out mum's pension as a result, or induce an income-tested fee at the aged care facility. And because once that money moves from home into cash, it's obviously accessible for asset and income test purposes. So there are strategies that if you sit down and have someone explain to you the alternative options that you had, that you could identify better scenarios for mum.
How do you deal with families when they can't agree on all this, and perhaps mum or dad is wavering, and you've got one of the kids with them and one saying, no, I don't think that's the best outcome for them? You've got to try and navigate your way through this and navigate them through it.
Look, and it is, sometimes it's very challenging at the beginning. From our experience, we've found once people have mapped out a number of options in front of them, they can see the difference, particularly from a cash flow perspective, because ultimately everyone loves their parent and they really want the best for them in care, and their mum's dignity in care is absolutely paramount. And that becomes very obvious when you're looking at different ways to fund your care, and you have someone sit down and explain to you the different cash flow implications from the different choices. And in most cases, that does sort out some of the family disagreements. We can't repair relationships and complex relationships. What we can do is bring an objective view to the table as to what is the right thing for the individual circumstance of the family. Because sometimes it might make sense to sell the home, but for other reasons, the home could be a lot of emotion tied up with the home, a lot of memories. Dad may have built the home after the war, and also there could be a financial reason. It may make sense to keep a hold of that property and rent it out and use that rental income to pay the fees. But on balance, we've found that families do respond to logic in this circumstance.
Lisa, you were nodding before, and it occurs to me that what you do is going to possibly encounter just as much family disagreement as there could be over money. Have you encountered it? How do you deal with it?
Yeah, we do. We encounter it all the time. I mean, we can't assume everyone has a happy family existence. There's a lot of dysfunctional situations where siblings have never seen eye to eye, let alone when it comes time to sell the family home and there is money involved. So we try and come in, leave it to people like Brendan, or lawyers as well, within firms like Brendan's firm. It's a very challenging time, and we can see the stresses and struggles it takes on the parents that are moving. They're watching their families, fight over things and have issues over certain items.
Yes, because the items, the stuff, the artefacts, obviously families have always argued about money, but they also argue about jewellery and clothes and books and things that have been on your dad's desk for 30 years. People argue about those things. You obviously don't want to be the referee here. They've got to sort it out amongst themselves, but you sometimes must find yourself in the middle of it.
We certainly are. And because we don't have that emotional attachment, we look at it from a practical perspective and sometimes have to get lawyers involved because it gets a little bit more serious than just a case of who's going to take this ornament or who wants that ornament. And, Mum may not be in a position to actually say, look, I would like you to have this, or I would like, my son to have this or daughter to have that. So it's a tricky situation. And often that is a good time around the Christmas time, around the table, chatting with Mum and Dad. If there are things that people have eyed and thought, well, that represents my upbringing, it might not be a bad time years before the parents might even be considering moving, saying, I love that ornament, it does this for me, or that piece of furniture is something I've always admired, and start discussing things like that a lot earlier. If there are a lot of sentimental items that really have value to you on an emotional level.
Yes. Actually, Kath Brewster, that seems to be the thing that's emerging, certainly most strongly for me in this conversation. Have these conversations as early as you can.
I think have these conversations as early as you can, well before they are needed. And as I say, make sure you have in place those documents which do give to somebody the financial powers and also the discretionary powers of the social sorts of decisions that need to be made. One very practical thing, which I am planning to do this Christmas with my family, is in fact to have one of them tape a recording of me explaining to the family, to the younger generation in the family, what in fact each of these ornaments, these artifacts that you're speaking about means to me, where it came from. This is something that your father and I bought in Italy, or this plaque is something that one of my sons gave to me from his first earnings, and that sort of thing.
What a good idea. But I can see that down the track, there won't be a dry eye in the house when they're listening to that tape recording.
Well, possibly not, but then at the same time it may mean that some of the arguments don't take place. Now, one thing that I think that I must say is that we should respect the wish of the individual as to whether or not they wish to remain in their own home, and I believe that the support services which allow them to do this, as long as it's viable, should be an entitlement, not merely an assessed need.
I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about this. Thank you, all of you, for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
That's Kath Brewster, the President of COTA New South Wales, and with me in the studio, Brendan Burwood, who's the Founder and Managing Director of IPAC Financial Care, and Lisa Oshlack, who's the Founder and Director of Moving On. This is Life Matters on ABC Radio National.